If this technology deployment is as widespread as the research already predicts is possible today, everyone will need to understand how to deploy a new interaction model. And not everyone will have to understand all the ways the AI works underneath and behind, just like I don't know how my phone does what it does. I just know how to use it.
That's McKinsey senior partner Alexis Krivkovich. She joins me and McKinsey partner Anu Madgavkar to help us understand what happens as people increasingly work with agents and robots. This is the McKinsey Podcast, where we help you make sense out of the world's toughest business challenges. I'm your host for today, Lucia Rahili. Alexis, Anu, welcome back to the McKinsey Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And kudos on your new McKinsey Global Institute report, Agents, Robots, and Us. In the current zeitgeist, one aspect of the research that stood out for me was that you disrupted the humans versus agents or humans versus robots and construed us very much as in a constructive partnership with these technologies. Alexis, what is it about that partnership that immediately resonates with you or makes you uneasy?
I think what's most exciting here is the fact that this technology hits every function and force in any industry you can name. And so the top to bottom scale of the impact here is truly profound. If you're frontline workers, factory workers, if you're white collar workers, all the way up through the CEO suite, just the scale of the change we're seeing, it's already here. So the real possibility and the huge challenge for organizations is how on earth do I absorb that much change this quickly?
Anu, what about you?
We found that the vast majority of skills are really shared. And so this is an opportunity that excites me because it means that by working with AI in some shape or form, we can all super skill ourselves. But it's also a source of uneasiness if you think about it, because what it means is we do need to use AI to super skill ourselves. We can't stay at that same base level of each skill and expect to add a lot of value. So we do need to enable everyone in the workforce to work with AI and get better at those skills. So it's a massive opportunity, but also, I think, a responsibility of how do you actually upskill people to use AI and be better at what they do.
The headlines can really be apocalyptic on AI vis-a-vis the future of work and job loss. And in this MGI research, you say that more than half of work hours in the US could be automated across, you were saying, a really broad range of professions, right? So if this isn't about job loss, what is it really about?
Well, the research definitely shows that based on currently proven technologies and capabilities that technology possesses, more than half of all current work hours could get automated. But I think what we shouldn't lose sight of is the fact that human beings are vital, even in the current work. A lot of this type of work is cognitive. A lot of it is actually social, emotional, interpersonal. And some of it is actually physical work. But more importantly, as we adopt and use technology in workflows and in business processes and things that people do as part of their day-to-day work, we're finding that that creates new kinds of work for the people in the loop. So that might involve new tasks to guide or prompt or validate or refine or build on what AI is doing. It may also involve completely new kinds of demand, things that just weren't possible to do, but now we can do them because we have technology. So we can do things at better quality. We can do much more R&D, or we can clean a facility like twice a day instead of once a week.
What do you think will define high value human contributions in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
There are a whole set of skills that involve critical thinking. So, aspects of problem solving, aspects of negotiation or conflict management, or managing a team in healthcare, for example, trauma care, or even first aid or complex surgery. We may use robotic and agentic solutions to aid that, but you would still continue to have human beings as vital in those sets of skills. But administration or customer onboarding or communications with clients or customers, those kinds of things could get much more automated.
Yeah, I thought that example of radiology was such an interesting one in the report, that radiologists as a profession, the number has actually grown since the acceleration of AI in diagnostic work and so forth. That was a great example.
Things become possible when a skill or a quality that's very scarce suddenly gets unlocked. And in the case of radiology, the fact that you could use technology to scan images and process data and bring out inferences so much faster just helped unlock that supply, make it more available, and met what you might call a latent or an untapped need or market for that thing. Even if you go back to the smartphone revolution, there were so many new kinds of needs that we discovered just because they became available, right? Like the whole app ecosystem and thinking about social media and marketing in a very different way.
In addition, there's skills we can already see in the skill index are going to matter more. Social emotional skills, negotiation skills, coordination skills, process management skills that existed previously, but we're going to put a premium on them. And we want people to spend more of their time in any job or task focusing in those areas as AI takes other things off their plate. And then I'd argue there's a new set of skills leaders in particular will need to have to meet this moment, especially things like a voracious learning mindset.
Alexis, you lead our people and organizational performance practice at McKinsey, and you have talked so much about the trend towards skills-based hiring. I'm wondering how that approach fits in here as roles begin to shift and change.
I was just with 24 CHROs last week from leading companies in North America, and many of them were discussing this conundrum of, I'm now facing a moment where, from a hiring standpoint, I both think every job description needs to be rewritten because some combination of the things I used to look for in the market are really not going to be nearly as important anymore, and other ones are going to matter a lot more. But practically what they said is, I don't think I'm getting better candidates because now I'm getting candidates who are using the same tools I'm using to try and predict what my tools will look for and set themselves up. So I think you're going to actually see some amount of us reverting to what you might call like old school analog ways, like come sit in an office and take, I don't know, a personality test, do a puzzle. We see folks are asking software engineers to do live code.
So all of these evolutions in the distribution of skills across this hybrid labor pool assume that companies actually capture the value of AI. The research puts that value at almost $3 trillion in annual value by 2030. But of course, we also see that most companies are not yet seeing meaningful gains, at least at the enterprise level. What needs to change there?
The real opportunity sits with how do you take what's right now more pilot and point experimentation in organizations focused on business value and explode those into big at scale, bet the company, change the business, points of EBITDA kind of opportunity. And I'd argue those are for most organizations, at least the starting point for those are few enough that what you really need is the leadership team to align around a value thesis. Like, where is the opportunity here? And then really marshal behind it in a way where you can attack it at scale. And what I mean by that is I think in most organizations, the biggest opportunities cut across more than one leader's domain. They might start in supply chain, but they immediately connect into the front end of customer service and delivery and ordering and processing and back into, areas of manufacturing.
Anu, anything to add there?
Everybody needs to flex and build their muscles a little bit and get more familiar with how to work with an AI tool or agent. But whether it really will be transformational in terms of the potential unlock is a question. And so it's probably the T-shaped approach, or maybe a series of T's, right? Where you do need that horizontal capability building, but then you absolutely need to place a few important bets around end-to-end processes to really change and reimagine and think about doing very differently. You also have to think about where is the market going to lead me and what parts of my profit pool are most sensitive to this disruption, whether it's an internal possibility or a competitor threat, or frankly, just what the market is telling us customers will want. So if you're in retail, it's entirely conceivable that your customers want to do agentic commerce. Or if you're a bank, it's possible that your mid to large sized client might start wanting to use agents in the interface with, the finance function and the bank, right?
It's interesting to think about in the future if this technology deployment is as widespread as the research already predicts is possible today, even if we don't yet see it in the workforce. Everyone will need to understand how to deploy a new interaction model. And not everyone will have to understand all the ways the AI works underneath and behind, just like I don't know how my phone does what it does.
Right.
I just know how to use it.
Right.
But when you're asking, particularly with things like agents, when you're asking them to do bodies of work, we will need to learn how to validate that, provide the right judgment, redirect, as Anu's described, work iteratively, test and learn. And now there's going to be a much higher expectation of experimentation, which comes with it real judgment to know where did that work? Where did that not work? What part of what I tried didn't work so well for me? And that's just a very different cultural day-to-day expectation.
What you're describing is almost managerial. So suppose I'm leading a hybrid team where some of my colleagues are agents and they're learning continuously and they're working unflaggingly 24/7. How does my leadership of that team need to change?
They will fuel the ability for me to work continuously at a different scale across a broader array of things.
I think the whole paradigm or the frame of reference that many organizations and managers have about productivity levels or KPIs or optimizing workload, quality, and output. These are the typical questions or dilemmas for managers. And there's a certain frame of reference they have that's based off what work to look like. And I think all these things are going to come up and be questioned in pretty fundamental ways. If you have an agentic solution that's able to, generate 5,000 reports overnight, you will come up against a new bottleneck because the human capacity to kind of review those reports won't exist, right? And every time you're up against a new bottleneck, I think there will be innovation and technology that then thinks about addressing that bottleneck, right? And our benchmarks of what is good or what is attainable will constantly change over that time. So I think there's going to be a lot of that flux and change. And part of being a good manager will be just having an appetite for that and being resilient through it and being able to be invested and creative through that process.
What if we were to redesign education and training from scratch on the basis of this research? What would we stop teaching and what would we double down on?
It's tempting to say AI can do so many things and, why should we learn how to do them? But the analogy to that is because I have a calculator, does that mean I spend no time just developing a certain ability to think about numbers, or just because I have a ChatGPT that can write something for me, does it mean that I spend no time actually trying to write myself, right? Because I think there is some element of very foundational cognitive ability or physical ability that comes just from doing something. And you're going to have to think quite carefully about what part of that you need to preserve versus what part you don't. And you may also, I think, over time, have less focus on very specialized types of learning and more emphasis on more transferable, foundational, generalizable types of skills and capabilities, because the workforce will be in flux. And if you spend 5 years going deep on just one narrow area or learning one particular skill or certification, that may not be relevant by the time you're in the workforce.
Careful, Anu, you're going to dissuade everyone from PhD programs. One thing I think is really exciting about this moment of reskilling and upskilling is how AI itself can allow us to do this so much better. So a lot of the feedback on workforce learning is twofold. First, you can get to a tailoring of one. I've ingested, all of the data points about how you perform, and I have built a tailored point of view of where you have skill gaps or opportunities and how you can close those. And then second, I can introduce them in the moments when you're doing the work. I just saw that you have 30 minutes free. Do you want to use this time to send out these 5 notes as follow-up to customers? This is a common practice for people, developing these sorts of relationships. I have taken a first pass based on your tone of voice and what best practice suggests will lead customers like this to respond.
So many are calling this an existential moment for leaders. Our managing partner for North America, Eric Kutcher, recently described this as a CEO legacy moment, a make or break moment. In that context, which risks worry you more? Moving too fast with agents or moving too slowly, and why?
Moving too slow. I think speed is a strategy in and of itself. And the biggest risk companies face is because there's so much ambiguity, so much unknown and unproven, that they will wait for more clarity before they make bets and move, with a belief that they don't want to waste money. And it's an incredibly dangerous position to be in, because by the time you get enough clarity to know definitively where to go, you will be so much further behind.
And of course, there are all of the considerations and concerns people have about speed, whether it's risk management, right? Or whether it's an understanding of ethics and compliance in the new context of AI, or whether it's regulation, or whether it's public education about how to use AI responsibly. On all these fronts, we're going to have to move faster to tap into this opportunity.
Looking ahead, say 10 years from now, what would convince you that humans and AI have built a partnership that truly works across the board for employees, for organizations, and for society?
Oh my gosh, 10 years ahead. This augments and unleashes human potential, not replaces it. And that we're on the other side of the uncertainty and the fear curve. And we're in a place where, just like a smartphone or a laptop or the internet, it's a positive part of our daily life. And the things we grapple with are how to maintain the right controls around that, the right equity for folks to have appropriate access. But what we don't worry about is, should it exist or not? And is it a force for good?
I think for me, it's about this new way of thinking about work as something we really enjoy and find more fulfilling, because work is so critical to the human project, right? But if we can use AI, or if AI has the effect of enhancing the quality of work, the experience of work. And then the other thing I would love to see is whether the benefits of AI have been democratized. Has everyone really felt them? Have we seen transformational effects and wider access and better quality? I think that would be real success.
Anu and Alexis, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks Thanks so much for listening to the McKinsey podcast. I'm Lucia Rahili.
And I'm Roberta Fasaro.
Find us on McKinsey.com. We'll have a transcript of this episode up shortly.
And download the McKinsey Insights app, where you can find this podcast and other helpful content updated daily.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to leave a rating and a review.
We'll see you next time.